My in-laws left me with their elderly cat, but when they returned, the house was empty. Jessica almost missed the scribbled note completely. It was wedged under her doormat like some kind of afterthought. Dorothy's handwriting looked rushed, almost guilty. Jessica, honey. Last-minute emergency. Aunt Mildred in Miami needs us right now. Whiskers is all alone next door. Spare keys in that fake rock by the mailbox. We'll be back before you know it. You're such a sweetheart. XOXO. The pit in her stomach told her this wasn't going to be simple. Brandon was stuck in Seattle until Thursday, and now his parents had basically abandoned their cat on her doorstep. She found the fake rock, tacky plastic thing that fooled nobody, and let herself into their house. The stench hit her like a physical wall. Old litter, sour milk, something that might have been rotting food. Whiskers was sprawled on their couch looking absolutely wrecked. 16 years old and clearly hanging on by a thread, his breathing sounded like a broken accordion, fur all matted and gross. The kitchen counter was covered in pill bottles and handwritten notes that looked like Dorothy had scribbled them while running out the door. Blue pills twice daily, white ones with food, shots every 8 hours. Important. Jessica picked up one bottle and her hands literally shook when she saw the pharmacy sticker, 247.99, almost empty. Jessica started doing math in her head and immediately regretted it. The medication alone was running over $1,000 per month, and that was just what she could see scattered around. God knows what other treatments this poor cat needed. She called Dr. Stevens, the mobile vet who'd helped with her own cat's emergency last year. When he showed up and examined Whiskers, his face went all grim and professional in that way vets do when they're about to deliver bad news. "How bad is it?" she asked, though she already knew from his expression. "Kidney failure, advanced stage, heart problems too. Without consistent medication and monitoring, he's basically Dr. Plostus Evans 2-3. Stevens paused, choosing his words carefully. He's suffering unnecessarily. The worst part was learning that Dorothy and Harold had been putting off proper treatment for months, probably hoping the problem would just disappear on its own. Now Whiskers was paying the price for their denial and cheapness. Jessica sat there, petting this dying cat who'd been dumped on her by people who clearly couldn't be bothered to deal with the consequences of pet ownership. The anger was starting to build, hot and tight in her chest. That night, Jessica tried calling Dorothy about 50 times. Straight to voicemail every single time, like her phone was completely shut off. She left increasingly frantic messages describing Whiskers' condition and demanding they call back immediately. Then she made the mistake of checking Dorothy's Facebook. There was her mother-in-law, posted 3 hours ago, grinning like an idiot on some Miami beach with a fancy smoothie in her hand. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to drop everything and live. Life's too short for worrying. Spontaneous adventure, Miami vibes, no regrets." Jessica stared at her phone screen feeling like she'd been slapped. Dorothy's phone wasn't broken. She was actively ignoring her calls while posting vacation selfies. The emergency with Aunt Mildred was clearly bullshit. She spent the entire night in Dorothy's house, giving Whiskers his medications every few hours and watching him struggle. The cat kept trying to eat, but could barely keep anything down. He'd cry these awful, weak little meows that broke her heart. By sunrise, Jessica had made a decision that would change everything. If Dorothy wanted to play games and dump her responsibilities, then she was about to learn what real consequences looked like. Jessica drove Whiskers to the most expensive veterinary hospital in Phoenix, the kind of place where rich people took their prize-winning show dogs. Dr. Deliu's Veterinary Hospital in Phoenix, Fort Nace. Martinez ran every test imaginable and confirmed what she already knew. This cat needed immediate, intensive, and very expensive treatment. "We can stabilize him and manage his pain," Dr. Martinez explained. "But we're talking about serious money, probably $5,000 just to get him stable, then ongoing costs." Jessica didn't even blink. She handed over her credit card like she was buying coffee. "Do whatever he needs." While Whiskers was getting the VIP treatment, Jessica drove to a law office downtown. Sarah Kim was this fierce-looking attorney who specialized in animal welfare cases. and she listened to Jessica's story with the kind of focused attention that meant business. Arizona takes animal abandonment very seriously, Sarah said, making notes, especially when there's documented medical neglect. Your in-laws could be looking at significant fines and legal consequences. They spent 2 hours going over Dorothy's social media posts, the medication records, and the timeline of events. Sarah was already building a case that would make Dorothy's vacation the most expensive trip of her life. The next week turned into Jessica's personal investigation project. She documented everything, photographed the disgusting state Dorothy had left the house in, saved every ignored text message, even timed how long it took Whiskers to walk across a room before treatment versus after. Whiskers was like a completely different cat at the hospital. With proper medication and care, he started eating again, playing with little toys, even purring when the staff petted him. The transformation was incredible and heartbreaking. This was what he could have been like all along if Dorothy had actually cared. Jessica posted on every Phoenix pet forum she could find, looking for someone who could handle a senior cat with medical needs. Margaret and William Chen responded within hours, this sweet retired couple who already had 2 rescue cats and understood exactly what caring for a sick animal involved. When they met Whiskers at the hospital, it was like watching love at first sight. Margaret started crying when she saw how much better he looked after just a week of proper care. They knew about the costs, the daily medications, the ongoing vet visits, and they wanted him anyway. The paperwork to transfer ownership took 3 days. Jessica made sure everything was legal and binding. Dorothy was about to come home to discover that her precious Whiskers now belonged to people who actually gave a damn about him. Brandon called from Seattle right as Jessica was finishing the ownership transfer papers. She told him everything: the abandoned cat, the ignored calls, Dorothy's beach vacation, the $5,000 in vet bills she'd racked up. Mom wouldn't just abandon Whiskers, Brandon said, but his voice was already wavering. There has to be an explanation. Jessica sent him screenshots of Dorothy's Facebook posts, time-stamped, while Whiskers was literally dying in their living room. The photos of his mother lounging poolside with tropical drinks while her cat suffered in agony hit Brandon like a physical blow. $5,000, Brandon. That's our house down payment money. Jessica kept her voice level, but inside she was furious, and she won't even answer her phone. Brandon tried calling his mother immediately. Voicemail. He tried Harold. Voicemail. Meanwhile, Dorothy's Instagram showed them at some fancy Miami restaurant complaining about the slow service. "What are you going to do?" Brandon asked quietly. "You'll find out when they get back," Jessica said. "But they're going to learn that actions have consequences." Jessica hired the most thorough cleaning service in Phoenix to make Dorothy's house absolutely spotless. Every surface scrubbed, carpets steam cleaned, windows gleaming. She wanted it perfect for what came next. Then she systematically packed up every single thing Dorothy and Harold owned. Clothes folded neatly in boxes, photo albums wrapped carefully, even Harold's golf clubs properly stored. Everything except the furniture went into labeled containers. The kitchen table became her gallery of evidence. Vet bills spread out like playing cards, before and after photos of Whiskers, printouts of Dorothy's vacation posts, copies of every ignored phone call and text message. In the center, she placed a beautiful framed photo of Whiskers in his new home, looking healthy and loved. A handwritten note beside the photo read, "Whiskers found a family that actually cares about him. Your belongings are safe in storage unit, 247 on Thomas Road. Rent paid through September. Keys attached." All those boxes went to a climate-controlled storage facility. Jessica paid 3 months up front and kept the receipts. This was an investment in teaching someone a lesson they desperately needed to learn. Dorothy's first phone call came at 6 a.m. sharp. Jessica let it ring 4 times before answering, just like Dorothy had done to her. "Where is everything?" Dorothy's voice was this high-pitched shriek that probably woke half the neighborhood. "Where's Whiskers? What did you do?" "Good morning, Dorothy," Jessica said calmly, sipping her coffee. "How was Miami?" The screaming continued for about 10 minutes. Accusations of theft, threats to call the police, demands for immediate explanations. Jessica waited for the hurricane to blow itself out before responding. Whiskers was dying while you were posting vacation selfies. I got him proper medical care and found him a family that won't abandon him when caring becomes inconvenient. Harold grabbed the phone, trying his usual intimidation tactics. You had no legal right to take our property. Actually, I did. Arizona law is very clear about animal abandonment and medical neglect. My attorney has all the documentation. The silence that followed was beautiful. Jessica could practically hear their minds racing, trying to figure out how their little vacation scam had turned into a legal nightmare. Brandon drove over to his parents' house and called Jessica from their empty living room. Jesus Christ, Jess, you really did it. The legal proceedings took exactly 7 weeks. Sarah Kim was ruthless in a way that made Jessica grateful they were on the same side. Every Facebook post, every ignored phone call, every missed medication became evidence of willful neglect and abandonment. Dorothy hired some bargain basement lawyer who clearly didn't understand animal welfare law. The guy actually argued that leaving an elderly cat alone for a month was normal pet care. The judge's expression during that argument was priceless. Final judgment. Dorothy and Harold owed $8,247 in veterinary expenses, plus court costs, plus a $2,000 fine for animal neglect. They were also banned from owning pets for 3 years and had to complete community service at animal shelters. The money was satisfying, but watching Dorothy's face when the judge read the pet ownership ban was absolutely priceless. She looked like someone had told her Christmas was canceled forever. Brandon supported Jessica through the entire process. For the first time in his adult life, he chose his wife over his mother's manipulation. The change in him was dramatic and permanent. 6 months later, Dorothy attempted what she probably thought was a peace offering, dinner at a neutral restaurant to work things out. Jessica agreed but set ground rules: no guilt trips, no victim playing, and definitely no attempts to blame her for their legal problems. Dorothy looked like she'd aged 5 years and 6 months. The stress of the lawsuit, the financial hit, and losing control over Brandon had clearly taken a toll. Harold seemed genuinely ashamed, barely making eye contact during the entire meal. We made mistakes, Dorothy said carefully, like she was reading from a script. We didn't understand how sick Whiskers was. You didn't want to understand, Jessica replied, because understanding would have meant spending your vacation money on vet bills instead of cocktails in Miami. Brandon backed his wife completely. He'd finally learned to see his mother's manipulation for what it was, and he wasn't going back to being her emotional punching bag. The dinner ended without any grand reconciliation, but with a clear understanding. Dorothy's days of running the family were over. Jessica had drawn boundaries in permanent ink. A year later, Margaret Chen sent Jessica a photo album from Whiskers' Gotcha Day celebration. The cat looked absolutely magnificent. Healthy weight, shiny coat, playing with toys in a sunny living room. He'd become the center of their household, spoiled and loved in ways Dorothy never managed. Margaret wrote that despite his age and ongoing medical needs, Whiskers had brought them more joy than they'd imagined possible. They'd gladly taken on the financial responsibility because they understood what real pet ownership meant. Jessica kept those photos on her refrigerator as daily reminders that sometimes being cruel is actually the kindest thing you can do. Whiskers got 3 more wonderful years because she'd refused to enable Dorothy's neglect. Dorothy and Harold paid their court-ordered reimbursement in monthly installments, each check a reminder of how expensive their free vacation had really been. They kept their distance from Brandon's family, finally understanding that their manipulation tactics no longer worked. Jessica had discovered something important about herself during this whole mess. She was much stronger than she'd ever realized when protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. 2 years after the lawsuit, Dorothy called Jessica directly, not Brandon, not Harold, but Jessica herself. Her voice was different, quieter, stripped of the usual dramatic flair. I wanted you to know that I understand now, Dorothy said. What I did to Whiskers, to you, it was wrong. Jessica listened without interrupting. This was the first time Dorothy had taken actual responsibility instead of making excuses or playing victim. I see the pictures Margaret posts on Facebook, Dorothy continued. "He looked so happy with them, happier than he ever was with us." The conversation was brief, but felt genuine in a way Jessica hadn't experienced with Dorothy before. She didn't offer forgiveness immediately, that would take time, but she appreciated the honesty. Brandon was shocked when Jessica told him about the call. His mother had never apologized for anything without expecting immediate absolution and a return to her previous status. This felt different. The whole experience had changed how Jessica approached family relationships. She'd learned that being nice without boundaries wasn't actually nice at all. It was enabling bad behavior. Standing up to Dorothy had been terrifying, but absolutely necessary. Brandon's relationship with his parents stabilized at a respectful distance. He'd finally learned to put his marriage first, and their relationship had grown stronger through the crisis. They were a real team now, instead of Brandon trying to balance between two competing forces. Jessica started volunteering at Phoenix Animal Rescue, helping other families navigate the complexities of pet ownership and medical care. Her experience with Whiskers had shown her how important it was to advocate for animals who couldn't speak for themselves. Margaret became a genuine friend, sharing regular updates about Whiskers' adventures and medical progress. The cat lived another 3 wonderful years in their care, surrounded by attention and love he'd never experienced before. When Whiskers finally passed peacefully in his sleep, Margaret sent Jessica a final photo, the old cat curled up in his favorite sunny spot, looking completely content. He'd died knowing he was loved. Jessica framed that last photo of Whiskers and kept it on her desk as a reminder of what fighting for what's right could accomplish. The empty house Dorothy and Harold had returned to wasn't just about missing furniture, it was about the consequences of abandoning responsibility for a living creature. Their legal case had set precedents that helped other families facing similar situations. Sarah Kim still referenced their documentation when working on animal abandonment cases, helping establish stronger protections for vulnerable pets across Arizona. Dorothy and Harold never owned another pet, perhaps finally understanding that living creatures weren't disposable conveniences to be dumped when care became expensive or inconvenient. The 3-year ban had become a permanent choice. Brandon often talked about how the crisis had fundamentally changed him. He'd learned to prioritize his wife's well-being over his parents' comfort, a lesson that had strengthened their marriage in ways he'd never expected. As Jessica cooked dinner in her peaceful kitchen, she reflected on the unexpected courage she'd found during those chaotic weeks. Sometimes the best plan was simply refusing to enable irresponsible behavior, even when that refusal created temporary chaos. Standing firm on principles, she'd discovered, was far more powerful than trying to keep everyone happy. The empty house had delivered a message that couldn't be ignored: abandon your responsibilities, and you might find your whole world rearranged by someone who actually cares.